Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 2 weeks, you know about the coronavirus. The World Health Organization has declared it a global pandemic because thousands of people have died from this, and it's everyone's concern. Let's stop denying or playing down how serious this is. People's lives and their livelihoods are at stake. The question today is, what has South Africa's government's response been to the coronavirus? How's it, everyone? Welcome back to Sit and Arbiter. My name is Gil, and on this channel we talk about South African law, how it is, why it is, and what it could be. At the time of making this film, South Africa has 116 confirmed cases of coronavirus. No doubt this is going to increase over the coming days. And South Africa's government finally responded and has declared a national state of disaster and has passed regulation to that effect. The purpose of this video is to give some clarity to what that means. So there's three things you're going to come away from this video with. Now, there's two things. The first is, what is a national state of disaster? And secondly, what does that mean for you? What do the regulations mean for you? How does it affect you? On the 15th of March 2020, the Minister of Cooperative Governments declared that we are in a state of national disaster. This needs to be distinguished from a state of emergency, which is something more serious and has more severe restrictions. In short, Section 37 of the Constitution governs a national state of emergency. This is when the nation is threatened by war, invasion, disorder, natural disasters, any sort of public emergency, and the determination that we are in a state of emergency is needed in order to bring peace and order back into society. The main thing about this declaration is that civil liberties are suspended wholly or in part. This is to the exception of the right to life and the right to dignity. These kind of things can't be derogated at all, but other things such as the right to equality, the right to access to information, housing, water, property, privacy, freedom of expression, these kind of rights can be limited to varying extents during a period of national emergency. Importantly, we are not in a state of national emergency yet, and even though this could be a real possibility, and when we do get to that point, or if we do get to that point, hopefully I'll make a video about it. For the time being, we are in a national state of disaster, which is obviously different. It is when a natural or a human-caused occurrence that causes disease or damage to property, infrastructure, or the environment, or a disruption to the life in a community. The main thing about this kind of declaration is that it empowers the minister to issue regulations for further management of the disaster. And also importantly, it releases money from different sectors of the government, including Treasury and defense, the National Defense Force, to help deal with the disaster. So now that we are in the state of disaster, the government have to tell us how this affects our lives, and they do so by passing regulations in terms of Section 27 of the Disasters Act. So although this type of law is subordinate to other acts of parliament, it is still law, and as I'll highlight, there are a number of important consequences. Without going through the whole thing, which I encourage you to do on your own if you have the time, here are some of the main things that I think you should know from the regulation. Firstly, a gathering is prohibited. A gathering is an assembly of at least 100 or more people, wholly or in part, in the open air or in a building or on premises. This means that even though there aren't 100 people in this very spot, if, for example, there are 100 people in the building on different levels, in my interpretation, that would amount to committing an offense which would make you liable for a fine or imprisonment. Also, a more narrow regulation applies to premises that sell liquor. In those instances, the threshold is only 50 people. In other words, if you have more than 50 people in a place that sells alcohol, then you would be committing a crime of gathering. The next thing that you should be aware of is that anybody who has been confirmed or is suspected of contracting the virus or has been in contact with another person who has the virus may not refuse consent to an officer who asks you to be submitted for medical examination or to be admitted to a health establishment or to be quarantined or isolated. Should you not comply with the officer's instruction, you will then be forced into quarantine and isolation for 2 days pending a warrant for your arrest. And now this kind of warrant would last for 90 days unless it's cancelled or the purpose of it has lapsed or they've arrested you. Also, provided that the officer has acted in good faith in carrying out the regulations, you're not entitled to compensation should you suffer any loss or damage. Obviously, if the police officer acts maliciously and purposefully damages your property and hurts you, in that instance, sure, you can have a claim. But in all other instances, if he acts in good faith, then you don't have a claim to any damage to your property in carrying out those regulations. The next thing is schools or partial care facilities. These must be closed until the 15th of April, which is obviously can be extended if need be. I'm not yet certain how it applies to universities, if the universities also must be suspended until the 15th of April. Time will tell what the university communication is. I'm assuming it does. Don't hold me to that particular one. Liquor on consumption premises, so places that you actually buy the alcohol and drink it at the same time, such as bars and taverns, restaurants and clubs, those kind of places that sell alcohol either must close with immediate effect, or unless they can accommodate less than 50 people. Now, this kind of accommodation of less than 50 people means that they must have adequate space, which means that each person must have at least 1 square meter per person in the premises, I guess. And they must also take steps to limit the exposure to the virus. Now, all off-consumption premises such as bottle stores or liquor stores or other places that sell liquor are also limited to less than 50 people, and they must also implement measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Now, both on and off places of consumption are limited to when they can sell their alcohol. That is from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and until 1 p.m. on a Sunday or a public holiday. Now, I've already mentioned some of the penalties for contravening the gathering prohibition, but some other noteworthy prohibitions are when a person intentionally misrepresents that she or he or another person has been infected, and which would make them guilty of an offense and can be fined or imprisoned. Also, if you intentionally expose another person to the virus, then you're also committing an offense, and you're liable for not just that offense, you're liable for prosecution for an assault, attempted murder, and if that person subsequently dies from that exposure, possibly even murder. So besides for those criminal charges, you're also an arsehole if you're going to expose someone directly to the virus. Now, another thing that's quite interesting is a person who intentionally publishes misinformation to deceive others about the virus itself, the infection status of another person, or the measures taken by government to address the virus is also committing an offense. So, for example, if you hear someone telling you that the virus can be spread through emails and WhatsApp messages, you would certainly be committing a crime in that instance. Or if we say that the government is going to come around to your house and kill you if you've been confirmed to have coronavirus, those kind of things which aren't true, those will make you liable to a fine or imprisonment. Likewise, like myself here, I run the risk of telling you incorrect information about the regulation, and therefore I can put myself at risk of that similar contravention. However, I'm pretty certain that I haven't misrepresented anything to you, and everything I've told to you so far is correct. And if I have misrepresented anything, it hasn't been intentional. So there's my disclaimer. But yeah, that's all I have today on the regulations. Please remember that this is a time we all need to be cautious. We need to wash our hands, self-isolate as much as possible, and get tested if necessary. But yeah, let's hunker down, and there's nothing too concerning at the moment. Should we just follow the regulations, we should get out of this no problem. My last thing I always tell you is that the law is only a tool, whether that is for good or for bad. And like any good tool, its real usefulness depends on those who know and understand how to use it. Knowledge changes everything. Cheers for now, guys.